Can I make sure I have this correct? Now there are three types of meta hardware I can buy. I can buy the Ray-Ban glasses. Secondly, there's the Quest VR stuff that's now like cheaper, better, smaller, all that they're continuing to invest into. Lastly, is this Orion thing, which is a new type of AR glasses.
I mean, you guys know this as well as I do that like Mark is just like a long-term player. Like he's going to grind this until it works, right? And like I think it's hard not to be bullish. The market seems to agree. But Dan,
yeah, I want Dan to weigh in.
I have not.
Dan's used none of it. You know what that?
I'm a Luddite.
No, you're not a Luddite. You're just that's called market opportunity.
Why, hello, friends. I just tried to open like Jess does, but no, this is Britt. Jess is not here today. And in her place, we are so excited to welcome a very special guest with us, Mr. Dan Fader from the University of Michigan. Hello, Dan. How are you?
Hello. I am
you
doing
didn't know
great.
You were going to be at the right place at the right time in the pool house with Sam today and get drug on this podcast.
I just looked at my calendar like Dan Fader, then more or less. And my wife is gone. And, you know, you don't look very much like Jess, but it works.
This is my first time in the pool house.
Welcome to the pool house.
Just in case you're not watching the video, his shirt is on. Just in case anyone was wondering, he does have multiple shirts on, actually. So he's well clothed in the pool house, unlike Sam sometimes is. Dave, can you tell everyone who Dan Fader is so that they all have context?
Dan Fader is one of our favorite people in the world. Dan is an amazing limited partner, and I believe both of our funds, both offline and slow, and runs the University of Michigan's practice over there. Dan, maybe it would be good if you downloaded your own bio.
Yeah, you can humble brag.
Yeah, that pretty much does it. But I know the reason that Britt likes me is because the Michigan was such a great host.
For the Texas game, Dan. Yeah. A couple weeks ago when we crushed Michigan in the Texas.
Everyone's gotten to crash Michigan football games except for me. But I do have a cool shirt. So that's worth something.
Oh, yeah? Is it maize yellow? Because that's what we learned about.
No, I have the blue one. I have a blue great shirt.
Oh, you got to go maize.
I will say that I did wear Michigan colors. You know, I broke from my beloved CU Buffs for one day. And I will say now I've been, texting back and forth with Dan. I've become a Michigan fan, and I want to hang out more in the big house for those football games. It was the coolest football experience I've ever had. Maybe the best sports experience I've ever had. Like that stadium is one of the biggest things. It's the biggest stadium in the country, right?
It is indeed. Yeah.
Well, I'm not much of a football game, but I did watch the movie Rudy on the treadmill the other day while I was running a half marathon. And that's a great movie. I was like thinking about all the movies. It's awesome. If you think about it, there's like Rudy goes in the canon of the right narrative of America. That's like exactly the America I want to live in and believe in.
Totally.
And it's just great. After that, I was like, what are other movies like that? So I started watching Good Will Hunting.
No. You need to stay in the sports vein, Sam. No. You need to stay in sports. So we got Mighty Ducks. We've got The Big Green. We've got, what else is there? Oh, Rookie of the Year.
Those are fine.
Come on, Field of Dreams.
Look, here's the thing. I'm not against any of those movies. I think they're great. Everyone loves Pitcher's Got a Big Butt. But in terms of like important American films that are about excellence and winning and like trying hard and like not mattering where you're from, it's like Rudy's like right up there.
So this is all about VC.
Well, it's just about like the version of America I believe in, right? And you kind of go back in some of these films, you're like, yes, this is the America that I love. And we need to make sure all children watch these movies. Like, I wonder if there's a way, like if there was a way to fund in public schools, all children watching Rudy, I would be into that.
Sam, weren't we working on a canon of children's
I have that.
Media at some point?
Well, I've mostly done with Aaron Sittig and a few friends. We have the canon of Western civilization, which is like the 100 movies you need to watch to be a citizen of America, and like what we need to train all of our children on. And like Rudy is on that list, but I had forgotten how good it
You
is.
should do books too, not just movies, right?
People don't read anymore, Britt.
Oh, well, you can do AI reading if you want.
At least it's not like the 100 TikToks you have to watch to be like, that's not, but there just like is this core Western canon of, and I think like, I don't know. Rudy, in my head was like, that's a great movie. I would have said like, so is Top Gun, so is some other stuff. And then I watched it and I was like, no, like this is like a really important film.
Can I do a quick tangent before we get into the news? Because we are going to get to the news today.
As though this isn't a tangent. Yeah, let's get off Rudy for a second and we'll come back to it.
AI question. People don't read anymore because social media has lowered attention spans, but also you can get an AI summary of basically anything. Do you think people will watch long content as much as they are today in 2024, 5 years from now? Or will they use AI to like cut down the snippets and sort of like watch an hour-long film in 20 minutes?
If they're training for marathons, they're going to watch them.
If you could watch Rudy in the exact right time as your marathon training on the treadmill, but you had to cut 20 minutes of it and AI could cut all the right places, would you have done that?
How fast are you going to run a marathon?
So I'm working on, my goal for this year is to run a sub-3 marathon. So last year I ran on a whim. A friend of ours, Casey Neistat, was trying to run a sub-3 and he invited me last minute to join his crew. I had never actually run a time marathon before. And so I ran a 3:09:59 without training.
You can watch The Godfather.
Yeah. You can, for training, that's another great American film, but less important. I mean, Britt, I think there seems like the evidence is that movies are going away, right? Like as a form factor.
I think it's binary.
Well, there's even longer stuff, like the Game of Thrones serialized, goes on forever type shit, which is like 1,000 hours. And then there's like the TikTok, but the middle drops out, right? And movies as a format as the middle. But I don't know. I think the 2-hour movie is just like a great format for storytelling. I hope it doesn't go away.
I love how that question landed with kind of a thump, Britt, because we were all like, this is such a sad future. The respect of the filmmaker's storytelling is just like, sorry, you are no longer
It's
the
literally
editor.
what's happening in culture. People have an 8-second attention span.
Well, or like a 50-hour attention span. It's not like, the problem is like, I think it's the middle.
It's binary.
The middle always drops out. And so there's no reason that in our today's
just like
age,
the tech IPO market.
Dan and I may have been talking about
Bringing
that
it back
merely moments ago.
Oh, wait. Okay. Well, should we hit that up real fast? What were you talking about? Give us a little sneak peek of your meeting that you just had.
What did we conclude?
We concluded nothing. That's not the purpose of a meeting.
Dan, you're an LP. We talk about LPs a lot on this podcast. So maybe give us your lay of the land. What's going on out there in the wild, wild west?
What's going on? So we talked about your sweatshirt that you wore to a conference, your DPI.
DPI is greater than AUM, yes.
Greater than AUM or more important than?
Kind of both.
Or,
it sort of signals the same thing, just with a catchier phrase. Yeah.
And so we're talking a little bit about that and kind of the importance of DPI from the LP or the institutional perspective. And I don't really think it's that's what's going on when you hear sort of the aversion to investing in VC from people like me. And I think what's going on is that people are not happy with performance, because if performance were great, it would be like 2020 all over again. And, people would be committing to new funds every, what was it, like 6
months?
7 months or
every 4 months.
Dan, how do you define performance?
Well, that's the other thing we talked about, because I think Sam has some skepticism about marks. But, for sure, there's imprecision in marks, right? Whatever they are, they're wrong. And I guess the thing that I think about is like, what decision are we trying to inform with those marks? And so if we have marks that are inflated or we think are too high, what decision is that informing? And for us, it doesn't really inform that much, in the sense that, in the case of Michigan, our spending rule is based on a rolling 28-quarter average value. So we're really not spending off those current marks. What we do need to do, though, is we can't have too much of anything that's illiquid, because eventually, it really constrains your ability to do things that are important, like rebalance and to reposition a portfolio. I think there's maybe an over emphasis on DPI, and that it's probably, if this ever makes it on the air, I'm probably going to get all sorts of angry phone calls and emails and letters. But I just think that that's not the whole story, but it seems like it's so much of it in the places that I seem to be traveling.
Well, and I think what Dan and I were also talking about, which is these are all, no measure is perfect, right? For anything, right? Like in terms of what you want. Like there's a way you could drive a bunch of DPI and destroy a ton of value, right? If you just like sell out everything just to generate DPI, right? And you're wrong about that, like you can be like pretty pissed about that. So but the thing I like about talking about like DPI right now in this moment is in some ways it's like the hardest thing for anyone to achieve versus other things. Like it's easy to tap dance a good story to the Middle East and raise a ton of capital and tell a vision of VC or a vision of the future. It's easy to, mark things wherever you want with it, but like DPI is DPI. So I like focusing on it because I think it's like the hard thing, which is you put money in, you get more money out. But even I would say it's not the only thing that matters or the only measure to use, right?
But you were also talking about just a natural aversion of VCs to sell for less than what the mark is.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of a weird thing because in other markets, it's totally acceptable to sell something for less than what your high water mark is.
Yeah.
And that may be a problem, or maybe it's a problem, or maybe not, is around what sort of secondary market is there and how efficient is that, or how efficient should that be?
Yeah.
And is the lack of an efficient secondary market the result of a aversion to sell anything for less than what you've marked it at?
Yeah.
Is that a part of it?
Or is it both of those things and the fact that the, various different financial regulatory regimes that have played out over the last 10, 20 years have led to a public market liquidity situation, which just pushes the time horizon out extremely far, right? Like this isn't how it used to be in the 90s. Amazon, Microsoft, these types of companies were public, in less than 4 years, right? And so the market could efficiently price those equities much earlier on in their curve. And the thing that you guys are pointing out is right. Most people just don't want to accept the market price, right? Like the market price is what the stock will trade at privately or publicly. And just because it's marked higher than that doesn't mean that's the price, right? And so I also think that there's this third rail that like people are just having to deal with this like very janky, very inefficient private market for, I think, way longer than is healthy for the ecosystem to some extent.
Yeah, I agree. Whether or not the public market is efficient at pricing these things is a whole separate question, but at least there's a price established based on what the market will bear and will be paid for, and that is the price, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's mostly that there is a price, and there are a lot more actors. They might be sophisticated, doing a lot of different things, but there is a price that you can stare at.
So Dan, how is this impacting what you're doing and how you're thinking about your strategy of investing into all of these venture funds? But beyond the University of Michigan, like, can you speak at all towards the greater temperature, and pulse of the endowment ecosystem?
I don't think so. I'd much rather spend time talking to GPs than LPs, to be honest.
Oh, us too.
Except Dan.
No, in all seriousness, we try not to get a pulse of the market in the sense that the way that we invest is really network based. So, and we see a lot of things come across our desks or in our inboxes, but really, I guess the number is actually zero. There's nothing in our portfolio that's gotten there without it coming through our own networks. And that's what I mean by, speaking to GPs more than LPs. I don't really have a great pulse of that. And I don't really want to be honest.
Why is that? That's an interesting strategy. I feel like a lot of LPs, even in our universe, say like, for us to invest, we have a lot of stuff coming through our network too. And we also are out there, hunting and getting like blind intros to founders. Did you come across that strategy of network only just while you've been at the University of Michigan, or is that something you saw work? and felt work and earlier in your career?
I think it's sort of sunk in over time. It's what I learned when I was at Princeton working with Andy Golden. And basically, the idea there was that we want to be in business with really great people, great groups, and that with a small team trying to cover the world and with the networks that Princeton has, and with later when I was at WashU and now at Michigan, there's some really phenomenal networks. It's really not playing to our strength to go out and meet everybody who's got a fund and try to be a picker. Being a picker is really, really hard. It's hard in any sense, right? If you want to be a stock picker, you know these things are done in isolation. And so what we're doing is just leveraging the things that we have that are basically in our own portfolio, which are connectivity with people, connectivity with information that other people just don't have, and then doing our best with that.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. This dovetails a little bit on a thing I was shit posting on the internet about this week about.
Oh, another one?
Sam, no
What are
way.
you talking about this week?
This is what I do, guys.
What aren't you shit posting about?
We should just open with that every week. Tell us what the latest shit post was.
What is Sam not shit posting about is the question.
It's hard. It's a lot of work to write all these shit posts, you know, even if I don't spell check them.
I don't know how you do it.
I'm writing one right now.
Dave and I were saying, when does Sam write this? Like, is he sitting in a chair? Is he out on a walk and it comes to him? Like, I'd love to know your process too, Sam, but you can keep
I
going.
have a bear file, which is basically half-written shit posts. And then between phone calls, I'll finish one. And everyone's like, why don't you put this natively on the platforms and text? I'm like, because all I'm willing to do is like screenshot my screen and post it on the internet. It's kind of the vibe.
Bear is the best, by the way. Bear is the best notes app.
I adore Bear. I'm a huge Bear fan. I think that I may have gotten to the point of breaking it. I have it like working on so many computers simultaneously. And I do have a problem where my notes get split a lot, right? Because of the syncing.
Oh, that's not good.
But it's kind of a me thing because I'm really, I think, a 1% Bear user here in terms of the number of places I have it loaded. But anyway, back to the shit posting and what Dan was saying. It's like, I was thinking about this with like seed investing, right? And here's my half-baked analogy, which is, you know, venture capitalists love to use hunting metaphors, right? As though they're like stalking big game or like in the right field or shooting bullets or how many bullets do you have and like all this stuff. And I kind of understand this for late stage investing and how people think about it, but I think it's exactly the wrong analogy for seed investing, right? And my analogy is it's kind of like if you're a seed investor, it's kind of like trying to hunt or like minnows, right? Where everything's so small. It's like you're firing like massive bullets, these like tiny little fish. Or you're like, oh my God, I found the biggest minnow. Like they're all minnows, right? And so the question is like, you're not a hunter, right? You're a fish farmer. Like you're a net farm. You're like a net fisherman.
I was going to say, what are you doing? Are you using a giant net?
Yeah, you're a net. You're like a trapper. You're not a hunter. You're a trapper, right? And the difference is, what you have to do is you put your nets, you put your traps in the right area. So it really matters, like where you select your fishing grounds. You don't obsess about the biggest minnow because they're all minnows, right? You're not like running around with your nets behind it trying to get it in the net. You're just like, this is where the net is, right? And then you bait it, and you bait it.
Is this your sales pitch?
Yeah, I'm baiting it with nets. Aren't you already an investor? I'm not selling you, am I? I'm pretty sure you're our largest LP or one of them. But
Not anymore. Just kidding.
it's like you already bought this strategy.
Yeah. He's in with the net.
It's unclear if the founders are going to want to be called minnows, but we'll see.
No, I think everyone's a minnow.
They're minnows. And then you get a lot of them. Just like being a net fisherman, I don't know what you call them, trawling, is like you don't want to pick up too much trash along the way because then you have to like pick through it on the boat and like find the fish and like get rid of the tires, right? So like there's all this stuff where it's like you just have to acknowledge the fact that like, you know, we're not like big burly hunters with like bullets going and shooting shit, as cool as that might sound. Like we're much more just like trappers, right? Collecting shit that happens.
So in this analogy, though, two things need to be true. You need to make sure you're trapping in the right part of the pond, right?
Amen.
And you need to be getting a lot of minnows at once to make sure that one grows to the big fish.
Yeah, I mean, that probably might be where it breaks down, which is like you're not just hauling tonnage of minnows. Not all minnows are the same, but like there's something along the lines of like, where do you put the nets? How do you bait them? How do you like not get stressed about chasing individual fish, but fish in area? I mean, like,
Dan, how do you feel about this analogy?
Certainly going to exhaust this analogy, and it's going to
that's what we do here.
It's going to really
Let's-
be.
Yeah.
But on this networking thing, and an analogy that I've used is not being around trolling, but there's an approach that's generally out there for LPs, which is what you do in this sort of picking exercise is you go into the benchmark and you look at, all right, well, where are the areas that are most robust? Where are the returns? So are they small funds? Are they funds in the US, in Europe? Are there specializations, et cetera? Try to find like, what are these ponds that you would go fish in? What are the most plentiful ponds?
It's definitely not Europe.
Thanks for that. But here's where it is. It's like that doesn't really work because, and I wonder, as you're talking about this trawling exercise, what you're really trying to do is capture, the outliers, right? And the outliers can be in really poor ponds. And if you're just fishing in that one pond that you think it's the most robust, it's really, you could actually have zero outliers there.
Yeah.
And so the network-based approach is really intended to find our way to those outliers, and they may be in lousy ponds and so forth. So I don't know, does the trawling kind of work?
Yeah, you sound like less of a trawler. I think it's an interesting question. I mean, like for me, with startups, like what do we know? It's like I don't want to fish where everyone else is fishing because it gets overfished, right?
Yep.
Because you just don't want to be. Your personality says you don't want to be.
My personality certainly says I don't want to be there.
He doesn't like people either, so he doesn't want to be where the other people are.
No, it's just interesting. I hear what you're saying, but it is. I agree with you. That's not trawling. That's not fishing a pond. Although I guess on the flip side, how do you think about that from a network perspective? Like I don't know anyone in Europe. So like when you think about going from person to person or any real investors in Europe, like if you were like, oh, there might be some outlier in Europe, but you don't have network connectivity, like how do you get to that person?
Without the connectivity?
Yeah. Or like you don't.
You
Yeah. Yeah. So you need that weird European cousin.
Our friend Kavit is European, and he's who I think introduced us to you, Dan. So that I got that European cousin in our network. The network all plans out. I like what you're saying here.
There you go. Well, should we move on to Meta?
Yeah, I want to move on to the news of the week. Now, Dave and I have been traveling the last couple of days, and Jess is gone. So, Sam, unfortunately, we have to rely on you to tell us what's going on with Meta right now because we haven't paid as close attention as we should.
Here's what happened this morning, last night. I got sometimes CNBC calls me whenever they need someone to say crazy shit on air. And so I got oh my God, we don't have anyone. Call Sam will say some wild stuff. Let's call him and put him on air. And what they wanted me to talk about was the Meta Connect event.
What does this say about CNBC is the real question.
No, I love CNBC. They're great. And I'm always happy to shoot my mouth off about random stuff. But Meta was having its Connect event. And the thing they were pointing out repeatedly on air was that this was the first time in a very long time they had covered a Meta event live, right? That they covered the Apple event live. They even covered an OpenAI event live. But it was like, they're like, what does it say that we're actually here, like in Menlo Park, covering like a Facebook event live, a Meta event live? And they were kind of making a big deal out of it. And, and the big discussion ended up being like, okay, there's like some AI stuff and there's a lot of hardware, metaverse-y glasses type stuff. And I mean, there are two veins. One of which I think is just true, which is they wanted to pit me as the guy who was like pro Meta hardware against another expert who was going to say it's all about the AI ad story. And I was like, no, I agree with that guy.
Little did they know.
Like, I completely agree. Like the reason the stock is ripping and the excitement short term is for sure about AI and its like mainline application to making Facebook tons more money.
I was going to say they're sitting there in Menlo Park for absolutely no reasons that have to do with the stock ripping right now.
And so like that was like, I was like, I can't disagree. That guy's totally right. But then the second thing that kind of came up is they're like, well, what is going on with the hardware? And, one, I think I'm actually curious. You guys have them in Japan. I just climbed the Teton with them. The first part is like, look, the Ray-Bans are good, right?
Yeah, they're awesome.
And they're not, on one hand, like you're saying, like, are they breakthrough technology? It's like, not really. I mean, the reality is like the bone conductive audio they do. I mean, I had a Bose headset that did that many, many years ago, but they integrated it well. The cameras, right? They actually take good photos, which is impressive, right? The first version wasn't quite there. The Snap ones aren't quite there, but they're good enough. Like, I actually want to use this as a consumer product, which is awesome.
And they look good, which is important.
I actually think of it as a camera. Like, I think of it as a camera that I carry,
a face camera, if you will,
or almost a lens that I carry that sometimes that I pull out instead of my other camera, depending on the use case.
So I think that's the thing. And then the third thing is like, well, is it about AI on board, or is the AI different? I was like, no. My kind of thing, which I think is real, is like, look, the AI stuff they're talking about, they actually introduced after the fact, right?
I've never used that, never will.
The thing to keep in mind, though, and I think this is the key part about the glasses and why they're actually interesting, is one, it's good consumer hardware. Facebook will make more of it. I have no idea what the margins are, if it's good business. Maybe someday it is, maybe someday it isn't. But it is just another pervasive touch point for the world's most pervasive media company to interact with people so that they can put the AI through that. They can put it's a pipe as much as anything else, right? It's a face pipe, if you will. And so, I think I am quite excited about that hardware. I think that was part of it. The other big thing is that, they introduced kind of next generation AR stuff and some VR announcements where this is the thing where, like, I'm not thrilled about the amount of money they've spent on it either, but CNBC is going, people are saying, the talking heads are like, wow, how could they burn so much money? I'm like, look, would you invest 5% of your market cap for the 10 to 15 year play of grinding success in kind of an obvious eventual compute platform? It's like, of course you would, right? And so it's one of those things about, the short-term story is obviously AI and like the direct dopamine money hit that's going to be for ads for the next many years. Like, everyone's excited about the stock price at all-time highs. It should be. Then there's this, like, how do we get pervasive human connectivity for all the other things we want to do, like AI, where I think the Ray-Bans are a great story and they're a great product. And then there's the like long-term thing, which is, like, Facebook's going to keep spending 5% of its market cap to make sure that they're first to this long-term vision. And, I think they've made Apple look pretty silly on a relative basis on this. And I think it's a really exciting story.
Can I make sure I have this correct? Now there are 3 types of meta hardware I can buy. I can buy the Ray-Ban glasses that can take photos, play audio through bone conductive measures near your ear. And now I think they're adding translate and other features to it from what I'm reading. Secondly, there's the Quest VR stuff that's now like cheaper, better, smaller, all that they're continuing to invest into.
For sure the best VR stuff out there. That's what it is now. Yeah.
Great. Yes, I know. And we all know how you feel about Apple's headset. And then lastly is this Orion thing, which is a new type of AR glasses. Is that right? Orion is different.
I don't think you can buy these. These are just like demonstrations.
Okay. And Orion has AR built in. So holographic displays, you can use hand gestures. It's almost like what Apple's Vision Pro is, but in a smaller form factor and with way less features.
More like the eventual version of the Ray-Bans is what I would say. And they're like $10,000 a pop. And you better believe I'm going to figure out how to demo them in the next week or two, but I haven't personally played with them yet. But everyone says they're awesome. And by everyone, I mostly mean Business Insider.
That's shocking to me. Where's your insider access, Sam?
Where am I going to get that? How am I going to get my hand? I don't know. But I suspect I'm going to force my way in to try them somewhere.
So really, like, are all these 3 things converging?
Yeah, that seems clear.
They're just going at it in different ways? I'm just trying to understand their strategy.
Yeah, in some theoretical future, of course. But I just think, like, you guys know this as well as I do, that like Mark is just like a long-term player. Like, he's going to grind this until it works, right? And like, the cool part is there's short, medium, long. And I actually think that's kind of important, because even if Mark wants to play a 20-year game for this, the market will be very sad waiting for 20 years. And so like you end up with this thing where I think this wasn't crystal clear before, but we now have a story where like, okay, AI is going to pay dividends and ads for a very long time, and Meta's going to make a shitload of money. Yay, market, right? Then there's like Ray-Bans. It's like, okay, they can actually make a consumer grade hardware device that is good and people want, not because it has AI or something. It's just like a good camera, good, Walkman. By the way, it's largely what your iPhone is too. Is like a good camera and a good Walkman, right? Then you've got like VR, they're clearly ahead. at price point, at hardware, the whole 9 yards. You still don't have super compelling use cases for it, to be honest. Like, but fine, it's gaming. And then you have the, oh shit, there's the long-term vision of maybe they will actually pull off, AR glasses, which would be a new compute platform and means they don't have to pay the Apple tax and whatever else. So I don't know. Like, I think it's hard not to be bullish. The market seems to agree. But Dan,
yeah, I want Dan to weigh in.
I have not.
Dan's used none of it. You know what that is?
I'm a Luddite.
No, you're not a Luddite. You're just that's called market opportunity.
Wait, but I want to know, Dan, I want to know, does this matter to you at all? Do you think that this is going to change anything about how people are investing, building new categories?
Are there any pawns to fish in here?
Yeah, does this change where the pawns are?
I don't know.
That's our job, I guess.
We just follow the experts, and that's you.
So my personal view is that the answer is for VC, not really, right? Like, I think this goes into the
Not
classic
now.
thing. Not anytime soon, and not
Right.
for a very long time, because I think it's one of those classic things where, like, the cost of entry to play in these games is too expensive for any startup to go after. By the way, Meta can't acquire anything anymore anyway because of the DOJ from a antitrust perspective, regulatory perspective.
Such a disaster.
And so you're just in this zone where, like, this is a big technology story, but not every big technology story is a thing where there's a startup angle or like a venture capital angle to them. And I look at this stuff and I'm like, yeah, I'm thrilled as a consumer. I'm thrilled as a shareholder, but this is not part of my like VC investable narrative at all, right? Despite the fact I'm excited about it.
You could sort of make an argument that, like, if VR and AR continue to grow in terms of market share and sort of consumer appetite, then theoretically crypto you could be more bullish, right? There will be more digital collectibles, digital goods across all
Yeah,
these
but that stuff's all
devices.
stupid anyway.
What's stupid?
Digital collectibles. I mean, this is what
You think that? I don't think
Yes.
so. No.
Look, this is something so I'm happy to say, I feel like Slow Ventures, we've gotten a lot right about the L1 game. I'm going to keep victory lapping it because I have to, because that's marketing what VCs do. Like, we crushed it. Sorry. I'm going to keep victory lapping that one for a long fucking time.
Oh, God.
But like, I will also say, like, we stayed.
You just set that one up.
Yeah, like, I got to do it.
I guess I'll have to start victory lapping too soon.
You got to victory lap the winners. You got to. Otherwise, how will people like Dan know you had them? But the collectible stuff, I did no investing in, right? Because to me,
I'm not talking about PDPs and NFTs in that way, but don't you think that, like, there is, whether it's currency or collectibles, there are true assets in these, especially with AR too, by the way. I think, like, there's so much that we don't know yet that's going to be built into this software.
I think you have to go back to the fundamentals of the idea of a digital collectible is, like, in my mind, fairly nonsensical. Like, the whole point of digital technology is you can infinitely replicate things for free, right? So any scarcity is fundamentally made up in the digital space. Like, it's one of the big differences between physical space and digital space. Is physical space, like, there is a literal scarcity. Like, the planet is only so big, the world only has so much whatever in it. Like, scarcity is actually a thing. Whereas, like, the whole point of digital space is that it's infinitely free and replicatable. So I don't know. I think, like, sure, there's an exception somewhere, right? And maybe finding that's cool. And I'm a big believer in how do you think about creating liquidity and physical, real, actually scarce things using digital platforms, for sure. Like, the idea that, like, NFTs or any sort of digital collectible is fun, can be valuable, I just find, like, pretty fake, personally.
Okay, that's your opinion. I think that's fair. Dan, go ahead. You can weigh in.
Oh no, I just think because it takes a while for things to dawn on me, but this may be completely naive and I'll regret saying it, but
That's the point of more or less,
Yeah,
is you
so-
regret saying the things you say later.
well, I'm not you.
It's our tagline.
I regret nothing.
No, but on this, the question about, hardware innovations that will be great for consumers around, AR, VR, et cetera. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like there are many great examples of venture-backed companies around that, but there are some pretty interesting venture-backed companies and ideas around things that have industrial or medical applications that are in the same, not even zip code. It's the same stuff, but it's a very different type of business that you'd be building and a very different type of customer. And that seems just, thinking about it a little bit maybe that's where the action is more than.
Do you mean like doctors performing surgery with AR or
Yeah.
something as an example?
Yeah, like AI assisted surgery or
Manufacturing.
Industrial applications or military applications or material sciences. Those seem like the places where you can actually build a company more sensibly.
Yeah. I will say to that point, I had a great Silicon Valley experience yesterday along these lines, which was I got invited by the founder of this company, Zap Technologies, that's making these crazy Stargate style machines for zapping brain tumors. And they've shipped these all over the world. They're unbelievable, like in terms of what the machines are. And it was really funny. It's a great company. They're doing really interesting stuff. It's even deeper than you'd think. A bunch of Stanford people.
Stargate implies the machines are very large.
They're huge and they're like spinning gyroscopes that like it was super cool. But the thing the point I was going to make about where the money is made in these things is like, you forget, because we live our lives in pool houses and digital space, that like one of the cool parts about Silicon Valley is like 10 minutes from here, you're going by all these random nondescript warehouses and you're like, what is in these things? Like what? And you open the door, you get to open the door every once in a while to them. And you walk in through nondescript, nothing warehouses. And you're like, oh my God, like there's a fucking Stargate machine in here, right? And like that's one of the coolest things that I think people forget about Silicon Valley, especially our part of it, is like, you go open some random doors and there's crazy Stanford professors, ex-Stanford professors doing like wild stuff in hardware and all this type of stuff that isn't the stuff we talk about on More or Less, but it's super cool. And like people are doing amazing stuff with that.
Hey, speak for yourself.
What, you open those doors a lot, Dave? You're always walking through random warehouses in the Matrix. You're mostly down by me in the South Bay.
One of my favorite ones was when I showed up in the Santa Cruz Mountains and there was this like star base situation where they were launching drones all over the place, and that company became Zipline. It was a very similar thing. They just had a bunch of containers like out in the mountains and these crazy catapults.
By the way, Dave, really good job right there sneaking in a lick the cookie on being early on Zipline. I like that.
I learned, Sam. Yeah.
Look at that.
I've got a lot of those hiding. Sam knows more than most.
To keep on the hardware front, does anyone know more about what Johnny Ive is up to? Because, the New York Times had a huge profile on him this week. And, he's now apparently building a lot of different hardware products of his own. He's got lots of clients that his agency Love From that are paying him hundreds of millions of dollars. So are we in like a hardware renaissance right now? Are there fundamentally like huge shifts happening?
I don't think so. No, I mean, Brett, I think there's some cool stuff. Like, it's clear he's putting out some really great new stuff. Like, there's some interesting things going on, but this is kind of, to use a Sam trope here, most of the clients that are listed in that article are large scale, $1 trillion, $100 billion companies that are doing things that startups can't play in, right? Even the stuff that they are purportedly working on for OpenAI, right?
Yeah. I'm not talking about a venture capital renaissance.
These are, huge, huge resources. And I guess that just goes to tell the story, which is that to play in hardware, you either have to be the most disciplined startup entrepreneur of all time, and probably somebody who's done it multiple times and is willing to go through it again, right? And to be extremely capital efficient in the world of atoms, which almost no one can do. Or you have to be, one of the great massive enterprises out there that has the ability to play the long game.
The great powers of our time.
By hardware renaissance, I was not meaning that like new startups are going to succeed in building hardware. I think that form factors are changing radically. What you saw with Meta happening today, Apple's maybe going to push new hardware. We're disappointed in Apple. And Johnny Ive is now working with OpenAI and all of these other big companies to design, theoretically, their new hardware devices. And so I just get the sense that form factors are shifting and people are really going to be innovating soon.
What I could be convinced of, if you forced me to be optimistic, is that everyone's sick of Apple owning the platform, right? Like Meta's been sick of this for a long time, right? And Mark has obviously been investing for a while in this long-term vision of getting Apple independent, right? OpenAI isn't going to want to be Apple dependent either if they're trying to play a big game, and so they're going to pay Johnny Ive $1 bajillion to like do something. Like I can imagine this idea that it's not that the platform dominance we currently have is so monolithic and so stifling that if you said to me more and more big platforms and companies are just getting fed up and like they're like screw it, like let's just Hail Mary this and try to do something different, I believe that. Now how successful that will be, I think is a totally separate question. But I do feel like we've ended up in a weird space there.
I think that's the developer entrepreneur story, perhaps, Sam. I don't think most new founders are out there going, wow, I'm really sick of Apple. Like, I don't think anyone cares at the
They're
startup
certainly
level.
sick of Apple charging them so much and there's in how they release software. They're all pissed about that.
Maybe, but I don't think a startup founder is out there worrying about this very much. Like, I think that they're, going to build what they're going to build and use the platforms that are available. I think if you switch over to consumers, it's a different story. I think that people are just sick of their phones. I think they're like really, really tired and exhausted by the current state of play. And so I do think that there's actually like this subtle demand out there. We've talked about it from the parent side. We've talked about how sick parents are of screen time and how damaging social media has become to children. But I think if you just like look at worldwide kind of behavior of consumers, I think that people want new stuff. They want like a new something, like a new somewhere to go in the digital realm that feels different. And so I think that's partially what's out there at the consumer level. And that's driving some of this activity. I guess the sad part is it's mostly incumbents filling this. And so they're unimaginative in what's possible. I always dream of there being more consumer hardware, but I also think that Dan's pretty right that, back to my Zipline story, the hardware stuff that does work as a startup tends to have an enterprise use case of some kind that enables it to, really have a business model straight out of the gate. And those tend to be, in the case of Zipline, it was healthcare and logistics and delivery in parts of Africa where there was no delivery infrastructure, or it's military, or et cetera, because you can get direct contracts and build revenue very quickly, very early, so that you have a pathway to low cost capital. But other than that, like, it's very hard to do anything.
The real Renaissance hardware, which I actually completely agree with, is going on right now in Ukraine more than anywhere else.
For sure. But that's the classic American story, right? Like, the American story of hardware is start a war, innovate in hardware.
We didn't start this one, but we can still innovate in hardware. So you guys, in terms of hardware in the future, let's end on, you guys are the center of robot future land. You're in Japan.
We are.
What's going on in Japan?
Yeah, we're actually here on a deep tech tour. Yeah.
Ooh.
We're meeting with the CEO of Kawasaki Robotics. We are going to the Okinawa
Kawasaki Heavy Industries.
Heavy Industries.
Heavy Industries is a great name. I wish that I had a heavy industry.
We'll bring you a t-shirt, Sam. I feel like you would wear that shirt.
All we do is invest in heavy industries.
I always used to joke that Jessica should start Jevel Heavy Industries because I feel like that's like the right compliment to a media company. Heavy Industries.
We're also going to go meet with, so here in Japan, Lawson's is like the biggest convenience store, and they're doing all of this interesting like robotics. They're doing robotics within retail, checkout, vending machines. There are also drone companies we're meeting with.
They're also using AI to do inventory, do very sophisticated inventory management.
Okay, so what is like the view from, because like I was at a conference last weekend, and when asked some of the macro people, they were like, what are the most interesting economies in the world? They're like US, US, US. If you're forced to pick a number two, one of them said Japan. So Japan actually was on a relative economic upswing despite their dwindling population, and China. Like, what is the mind-blowing shit they're doing right now that's not happening in the US yet?
I think that Japan just has the ability to focus and execute on technology in particular. I mean, just walking around Tokyo is unbelievable. It just gives you a different sense for what's possible with atoms, frankly. Like, the stuff that they do in terms of construction, in terms of digital signage, in terms of robotics, and, just like It's unbelievable.
Yeah, when was the last time you were in Japan?
A couple months ago or so.
Yeah.
Dan's a real expert in Japanese business, actually.
What did you learn from your last trip in Japan? I haven't been to Japan in years.
You should come with us, Sam.
Things really work in Japan, to your point, Dave. I mean, they just really do. And it's like top to bottom. If you walk past a construction site, it is so
It
dialed
works.
in. I mean, everything is just really, really well engineered, really,
It's shocking.
really well done. It's amazing.
It completely changes your frame for what's possible. Like it gives you a sense that there are ideological issues in America that stop us from doing some of these things. It's not that these things aren't possible. It's that ideologically and culturally, we still have a lot to learn from the East. At the end of the day, we are a toddler country, right? Like this is a country that's 2,000 years old. And so culturally, it's just a different planet.
I guess this is something we also talked about.
We had a very efficient meeting, by the way.
And it is cold here, by the way, by your pool.
You think it's cold by the pool?
Oh,
I don't know. You're from Michigan.
The heat, Sam.
No, we were talking a bit about this notion of like, who are these people who are founders, and are there really like real founders out there, and who's doing what? And I wonder, with that sort of culture in Japan around engineering and excellence up and down the stack, is there something different about the way you could envision companies being built there, in the sense that you have people who are doing a job in building things, as opposed to 500 founders going out to do the one thing?
Yeah, Dan, it's a really good point. And we've spent a lot of time, we host these we bring founders and GPs over here. One of our partners at Offline is Japanese and worked with Steve Jobs for 30 years. And so Apple actually learned a lot from Japan. A lot of people don't realize this, but Apple, many of its processes, the way it focuses on design and engineering first and quality, is really Japanese processes and ways of thinking. And so we've been doing this for quite a long time. And I just think that this is a really right point, Dan. And one of the big differences between Japanese culture and American culture is that Japanese culture, it's actually quite hard to break out of the culture and to be a founder, because the culture is so collectivist. It tries to, people tend to all do the same thing. Breaking out of the group is, considered actually kind of not a good thing to do. And so to be the maverick that breaks out of the group and establishes a new trend or a new something here is actually quite hard. The power of it, though, is when you do, the culture tends to strongly, align behind you. That's one of the reasons why trends are so powerful here. But the existence of the many entrepreneur scenario that you described is definitely true. You don't see it the same way here. And we have the opposite problem, right? Where we have a culture that is the American dream. Everyone wants to be a founder, or if whatever you're doing, you're not happy doing it because you want to go up to the next rung and, make it in America. And so we tend to have this opposite problem where everybody's shooting off and doing new things. And it's very hard to collect people around something. And you end up with a highly individualist culture. And so I think that both can learn from each other, to your point.
I think it's a more balanced view, because I think so many of our friends are so enamored with everything Japanese and Japanese culture and Japanese da-da-da. And like, I'm always kind of pushed to be the contrary and taking the under on it, where I'm like, you got one of my favorite facts.
No way. Sam's taking an under?
I love the under.
I've had to tell everybody in our back channel, just assume Sam is going to take the under on whatever you're saying.
It's the more or less. Yeah, he's the less.
I'm the underbot. But I say how would the Japanese feel about the movie Rudy? It's like, they don't want Rudy, right? Like that's like not their thing. And Rudy's awesome. Or put differently, what I was going to say before we got on that is, one of my absolute favorite facts about Japan, I love this fact, is that in Tokyo, the streets are numbered not based on where they physically are, but based on the order the buildings were made, right? So building 1 and building 2 on a given street could be miles apart from each other, right? And the interesting thing about that, right, if you think about it, is like it's a reasonable thing, but it is completely impenetrable to an outsider. Because if you're a foreigner and you're like, oh shit, where's building 2 on this street? You're never going to fucking find it, right? Like, and I think that the whole thing is it's very hostile to outsiders, right? It is very collectivist. It's very stay in line. Like there's, and I think that's why, like, candidly, like there haven't been that many great Japanese companies, right, that have been founded.
I don't know, Sam. That's like a hard. I'm gonna push you on that one, man.
There's not that many. Like in the last, like of the
Sony, Mitsubishi, Hitachi, Epson.
No, those are all
Toyota.
old companies. Like
Toyota.
$0 trillion.
Sam, you drive Toyotas.
Uniqlo.
I do love Toyota.
The list goes on, man.
The internet is dominated by America and China, not by. There's no global Japanese internet companies. 0.
You want to know one other really interesting thing about your
Name
point?
one important internet company from Japan. Name one.
Line.
Please. A regional player at best. That's your best example.
Rakuten.
For like one of the best
Rakuten.
economies in the world, they have been unable to produce internet companies, right?
Japan is keeping Yahoo in business.
Yahoo Japan's pretty big. Like these are
Not that big.
these are
Yahoo
not
Japan.
small, Sam.
Your retort to is Yahoo Japan as like an
No, I
important-
just said it's keeping Yahoo in business.
Yahoo Japan is an independent company. It's not actually related to the
Sure,
parent.
what's its market
Okay, then
cap?
I take
It
that
ain't
back.
no $1 trillion baby. Look, the basic point is like I think that there's a lot that is cool about Japan and a lot you can learn from it. I'm not against it. Actually, I love their sushi. There's a lot I like about Japan, but I also think that there's something interesting to your point about different moments in history, what types of organization you need that have been successful that produce different valuable companies. So yeah, Japan did produce a lot of 1980s debt-fueled conglomerates that were super successful, but they failed at the highly like nimble internet economy of the last many years. We'll see what happens next, right? Is there something where they're going to dominate next? We'll see, right?
We'll find out this week.
I'm a huge fan of Japan. by the
Yeah.
way. And so just on the movie side, I think one of the best movies that I've seen in a long, long time is Perfect Days. I don't know if you've seen that. It just really captures so much.
Oh, Perfect Days is amazing. Sam, you'd like this movie.
Okay.
But it really captures.
How does it compare to Rudy?
It's,
It's kind of a Rudy style movie, actually.
Shogun won all the Emmys last week.
Yeah, Shogun was incredible.
But that is not a Japanese show.
It's literally about feudal Japan.
It's about a Westerner who goes to
Called
Japan.
Shogun.
Yeah, it's great. I loved it.
But anyway, I think it's a great movie.
That is their version of Rudy, Sam.
But Perfect Days is great, and it does capture just the essence of like what it feels like. But from what we've seen, it is harder to build a business from scratch in Japan. It takes longer. You need to build a lot more consensus. I'm not talking about internet companies where you can do this with a few people, but it does take longer to build substantial businesses. But I do think that when you get there, there's a real durability about those businesses.
Absolutely.
And I think there's something we could really learn, about building enduring businesses from the way that Japanese businesses are built from the ground up.
Fair enough.
Dan, there's a Zen monk that we've had a long relationship with and that I study with when we come over here. And he one time looked at me and said, "You Americans, you know how to start things, but do you know how to keep them alive over the long term?"
No, we just sell them to the public market and move on.
Except for in this era.
That's why we need companies to go public faster, Dave.
Right.
Anyway.
All right. I'm going to end us there. I think we've had a delightful conversation.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan, for jumping on from the pool house.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
How was your first show? Yeah, was it what you expected and more?
Well, the first time I came to the pool house, I didn't make it into the pool house. I was wandering around in the dark out here.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And I knocked on your front door and Jess was like, "What is going on here? Who is this person?"
Yeah.
Well, we're glad you made it. And Sam, send our best to Jess and
We will.
Mav, the surgery. And thank you to our back channel and for all of you out there listening for giving us great ratings, tips, reviews, all the things. And we will
Tips? Do we get tips now? Oh, you mean like like
Not
ideas.
those tips, not OnlyFans tips. Those are what you send out, Sam. We get actually insider tips. And everyone else, we'll see you back here next week for another episode of More or Less. Bye, guys.
Thanks, friends. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.